Welcome to this explainer. We're going to jump right in today because we have a genuinely fascinating journey ahead of us. We are unpacking Eva Ragland's 7-year strategic handover report on how to navigate a highly volatile macroeconomic environment. It's essentially a masterclass. It tracks all the hard-fought wins, the terrifying economic drops, and the ultimate stabilization of an entire nation's financial system. To really get why this matters, I want you to step directly into the shoes of a chief economic policy advisor. Imagine you've just been handed the keys to a nation that is perpetually teetering on the brink of a recession. Your citizens are watching your every single move. Every tax adjustment, every little interest rate tweak you make, it has an immediate real-world impact on millions of people. So the big question we're answering today is this: how do you save a roller coaster economy from going completely off the tracks?
Okay, let's dive into this. To understand the game plan, we really have to understand the battleground. Ecoland is what economists call a small and open economy. So its baseline operating environment is incredibly volatile. Because it's open but small, Ecoland doesn't get to dictate global market conditions. Instead, it's highly vulnerable to global headwinds. It's a true roller coaster economy. The administration realized right out of the gate that they couldn't just set policies on autopilot. No way. Constant, active policy intervention was absolutely required just to keep things somewhat stable.
And, when a government actively intervenes that much, the public definitely reacts. Over the administration's 7-year run, constituent happiness was just bouncing all over the place. During those first few years of active policy adjustments, it fluctuated wildly between 60 and 80%. People were feeling every single bump and curve of this economic roller coaster. But take a look at that devastating drop right in the middle. 35%. Let that sink in for a second. That is the terrifying Year 4 crisis. Nearly 2/3 of the country had completely lost faith in their government's economic leadership. This was absolutely the lowest point of the entire term. It was a massive make-or-break moment where the administration basically had no choice but to listen to advisory feedback and kick off a massive strategic course correction. Now, what's really interesting about this is the inverse force that was driving that massive drop in approval. During that Year 4 crisis, Econland's real GDP hit rock bottom. At the exact same moment, the unemployment rate spiked to its absolute highest level of the whole 7-year term. To pull the country out of this terrifying nosedive, the administration executed a really targeted decrease in corporate taxation. This was a vital reaction. It directly incentivized manufacturing, which got people back to work without causing severe inflation. But that corporate tax cut, that was just one piece of a much broader fiscal strategy. To truly level out this roller coaster, the administration needed an anchor, and they found it by dropping the target income tax rate to between 18 and 19%. Advisor Ragland explicitly modeled this anchor after the 1990s U.S. economy. The whole idea was to give citizens some real financial breathing room, creating an environment where people could afford to just live, without taxation feeling like this constant looming threat. And it worked. Dialing down the income tax successfully stabilized GDP growth, and it actually ended up outperforming global predictions. But here's the catch. A government can't just cut taxes forever without eventually running out of money, right? And that brings us to their brilliant 2-phase corporate tax strategy. In Phase 1, which covered those first 4 years, they decreased corporate taxes to stimulate hiring and manufacturing. That was a completely necessary stimulus. But Phase 2 is where the long-term vision really shines. In the final 3 years, they smartly increased the corporate tax rate and locked it firmly at 20%. Paired with that 19% income tax, this consolidation phase generated a vital budget surplus. And this brilliantly illustrates how this specific expansionary fiscal policy actually played out in the real world. By enacting those strategic tax reductions, the administration effectively shifted aggregate demand to the right. The whole goal here was to close the recessionary gap and meet long-run production potential, all without triggering disjointed inflation. It was an incredibly delicate balancing act, trying to spur growth while keeping prices in check. So while the fiscal tax policies were finally working out, monetary policy entered what I kind of like to call the danger zone. Think of interest rates like a thermostat for the entire economy. You turn it down too low and things freeze up. You crank it up too high and the whole house overheats. While in Year 2, the administration reduced interest rates down to 2.5%. This inadvertently caused immediate deflation. The economy basically froze. Realizing their mistake, they cranked the thermostat way up, hiking the interest rate to 3.5% over Years 3 and 4. This rapid seesawing created a massive problem that demanded an immediate stabilization maneuver in Year 5. The cost of that interest rate overcorrection was honestly devastating.
By hiking the interest rate up to 3.5% just to fight deflation, they inadvertently overheated the economy, literally like pushing a furnace to its absolute maximum limit. Inflation catapulted from less than 1% all the way up to dangerously high levels, well over 5% by year 4. The roller coaster was completely out of control again.
Let's move to and see how this builds, because faced with that dangerously high inflation in year 5, the administration did something highly counterintuitive. Actually, scratch that, it was a stroke of tactical genius. Instead of altering the interest rate yet again, they just put a padlock on it. They kept interest rates locked and simultaneously increased government spending. This specific, bold combination forced a steep, immediate decline in inflation, back down to below 1%. And following that drop, they gently tweaked the interest rate to a permanent 3%, which finally generated a slow, steady economic climate. All of this wild trial, error, and course correction eventually led to the ultimate solution, an optimal macroeconomic lever matrix. To achieve real stability, the target settings were dialed in perfectly. We're talking an 18 to 19% income tax to stabilize GDP, a 20% corporate tax to generate a surplus without crushing manufacturing, limited and targeted government spending to control those inflation spikes, and a steady 3.0% interest rate to prevent any deflationary spirals. Finding this exact balance of levers resulted in a profound realization for the administration. It's summarized perfectly in this quote. When a government achieves a surplus, it inspires its citizens with the confidence to save and spend sustainably. This is absolutely crucial to understand. A government's proactive fiscal health isn't just about balancing a spreadsheet in some back office. It directly, tangibly influences the psychology, the confidence, and the spending habits of its own citizens. So as Eva Raglan handed over the keys to the next administration, she left 3 rapid-fire final directives for economic survival. First, action over inaction. Doing nothing is simply not an option. Proactive, calculated adjustments are mandatory if you want a budget surplus. Second, the psychology of surplus. Fiscally happy, confident citizens drive a healthy economy. And third, debt aversion. Governments absolutely must limit their spending to set a prime example for their people, instead of sinking further and further into national debt. It is pretty amazing how much a simulated environment can teach us about real-world economic pressures, right? By understanding how these specific levers of taxation, spending, and interest rates all interact with one another, we become much more informed citizens. So I want to leave you with a final thought to ponder today. Take a hard look at the fiscal and monetary policies happening in your own country right now. Based on the hard-learned lessons of Econland, how would you grade your own real-world government's economic maneuvers? Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and I'll see you next time.